What if everything we thought we knew about royal scandal was just the tip of the iceberg? What if beneath the palace's polished marble floors and ancient velvet tapestries, there was a secret, hidden in lines of digital code, that would shatter one of the most controversial royal narratives of the modern era? This story doesn't begin with a tabloid headline or a paparazzi photo. It begins with something far more dangerous, a silent digital fingerprint, a breach, a deletion, a hidden entry into a system not even most royals have access to. And when Princess and the no-nonsense, steel-spined force of the monarchy decided she'd had enough of the rumors and half-truths, she went public. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. The fallout? A royal detainment, a family confrontation, and a silence broken in the most devastating way. This isn't fiction. This isn't speculation. This is the story of how the royal family, already teetering under public scrutiny, uncovered a breach in its most sacred security system, and how all signs pointed to one woman, Meghan Markle. But before we get to the arrest, before we unearth the footage, and before we crack open the log files no one was meant to touch, we need to rewind. Because this story isn't just about a woman who dared to challenge the monarchy. It's about a system that cracked open to reveal a betrayal no one saw coming. And the first person to notice something was off? Princess Anne. Now ask yourself, why would one of the most stoic, tight-lipped royals suddenly speak out, after years of remaining publicly neutral about her nephew's wife? Because something happened that crossed a line. Not just a royal protocol line, but a line that triggered silent alarms, summoned internal investigators, and ultimately reached the hands of British intelligence. Let that sink in. This isn't just another Meghan versus Palace gossip war. This is classified, tracked, verified. And it all started with a ghost entry in the Royal Security Schedule archive, a place so locked down that even working royals require fingerprint access just to view it. So how did someone outside the working senior royal row to get in? Better yet, why? And if you're wondering, why now? Oh, you're not alone. Because for years, Meghan has walked the line between outsider and insider, pushing protocol, challenging hierarchy, and rewriting royal norms. Some called her a breath of fresh air. Others saw her as a storm brewing. But nobody expected this. Let's go deeper. For months, whispers circled behind palace doors. Royal staffers noted unusual time changes on secured schedules. Meetings appeared, then disappeared. Car routes were altered last minute. Security officers were reassigned without explanation. At first, it was blamed on glitches, human error, miscommunication, until someone ran a system audit. And buried deep in the metadata of a restricted file, a digital footprint popped up, traced to an external IP. An American IP. It wasn't proof, not yet. But it was enough to alert Princess Anne. And let's be very clear here, Anne isn't the type to jump to conclusions. She's military-trained, protocol-obsessed, and fiercely protective of the crown. When she speaks, it's not for drama. It's for duty. So when she summoned the internal digital security task force to her private office in St. James's Palace, it wasn't just out of curiosity. It was a warning shot. What she uncovered during that initial briefing made her blood run cold. Not only were internal security logs accessed without authorization, they were altered. Arrival times shifted by just enough to throw off security convoys. Guard posts were rerouted. Private appointments between senior royals disappeared from the master schedule entirely. These weren't random glitches. This was calculated, intentional, and it wasn't just about when someone would be somewhere. It was about who would or wouldn't be protected. Think about that. Now pause and consider the weight of such a breach. We're not talking about Meghan changing her RSVP to a garden party. We're talking about the manipulation of information that directly affects royal safety. This is national security, not celebrity headlines. Still, at this point, everything was happening in silence. No press releases, no hints, no leaks. Not yet. Because the moment the palace went public, the backlash would be uncontrollable. So Anne did what Anne always does. She investigated quietly. She worked with security analysts and data recovery experts. She reviewed CCTV footage. She cross-referenced timestamps with real-life outcomes. And slowly, piece by piece, a pattern emerged. Every breach traced back to one period. One time frame. One IP. And guess whose team was operating from that IP during that time? Now, I'm not going to give you everything up front. Where's the fun in that? But I will tell you this. The trail didn't just lead to Meghan. It walked, talked, and typed its way right to her fingertips. And when Princess and William and, shockingly, Harry stood together behind closed doors for a royal emergency briefing, the silence was broken. Not with rage, not with panic, but with a question that chilled the room. How long has she been doing this? Harry was pale. William was furious. And resigned, but ready. Because the next step wasn't gossip control. It was protocol enforcement. Real consequences. The Queen may have passed. Charles may be king. But in moments like these, it's the steel pillars like Princess and who make the monarchy impenetrable. That's why what she did next changed everything. She went on record. For the first time in decades, she issued a personal statement to the Royal Council, confirming unauthorized access, tampered records, and foreign device interference with protected systems. Without naming names, she named the truth. And that was enough. It triggered a cascading reaction. Authorities were looped in. Private investigators were granted temporary access to certain secure platforms. And Meghan Markle, Duchess, media icon, and former royal, found herself under the unthinkable. Detainment. Not a mugshot. Not handcuffs in the street. But a quiet, deliberate move by British officials that signaled one thing loud and clear. Enough was enough. Now, you might be wondering, how did it come to this? Didn't Harry see this coming? Did Meghan act alone? Was this sabotage, curiosity, or something more sinister? You'll get those answers. Every last one. Because the story's just getting started. But let me leave you with this. When the palace guards changed formation that morning, when Princess and walked silently past them with William at her side and Harry a step behind, the weight of centuries pressed down on their shoulders. Because history was unfolding, and someone was finally being held accountable. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. What if the most dangerous royal secret wasn't whispered in the halls of Buckingham Palace, but passed through encrypted servers, buried under digital dust, and left behind like a footprint in wet cement? And what if the first person to suspect it wasn't a gossip columnist or a jaded ex-staffer, but someone inside the palace, quietly observing from the shadows? You've heard of whispers before. The royal family has endured them for centuries. Affairs, power struggles, backroom deals, they're baked into the institution like the crown jewels in the tower. But this wasn't some wild tabloid theory about tiaras or tantrums. This was a creeping suspicion that someone was accessing things they shouldn't. It began, as most catastrophes do, with something small. An assistant, loyal, underpaid, practically invisible. Noticed that a scheduled security briefing for Princess and had been shifted by 15 minutes. Nothing drastic. Just enough to throw off the timing for her protection officers. It was flagged, corrected, but it happened again. Then again. Meetings would vanish. Then reappear. Drivers would be told one location, only to receive last-minute reroutes from a different email thread. It was glitchy, unusual, and far too consistent. You might think, okay, a few calendar mishaps. So what? But inside the royal ecosystem, every minute matters. Every route, every room, every doorway has a layer of protection tied to it. When that system starts bending, even subtly, it's a red flag. And in this case, it wasn't just a red flag. It was a breach waiting to be confirmed. Still, no one wanted to escalate. Not yet. Because what if the truth was worse than the suspicion? That's the contradiction at the heart of the monarchy. It survives by silence, but it crumbles under secrets. And the one thing this institution has always feared? An inside job. Now, think about the timing. All of this began months after Meghan and Harry's Netflix docuseries detonated across screens worldwide. Emotions were high. Trust was low. And while the public debated whether Meghan was a victim or a villain, inside the palace, people just wanted to breathe again. But the silence that followed the media storm wasn't peace. It was pressure. A tension you could feel in every room, every hallway, every unread message. And through that tension, the rumor began to breathe. It started as a question passed among junior staffers. Did you hear about the breach in the Rota? Someone would whisper back, yeah, apparently a schedule vanished. IT's looking into it. Another voice, lower still. I heard it came from California. And then the eyes would meet. Knowing. Fearful. But they never said the name. Not yet. Because in palace culture, to name the problem before it's proven is to bring wrath down on yourself. Careers have been ended over less. Still, the rumor refused to die. Because the anomalies refused to stop. Princess Anne's equestrian event, cancelled at the last minute due to scheduling inconsistencies. Prince Edward's charity appearance, leaked to paparazzi hours before his arrival, even though the address was redacted from public records. A late-night alarm in Windsor Castle's East Wing, later blamed on a technical irregularity. It was too much, too close together, too deliberate, and slowly, all eyes turned toward the same direction, but no one wanted to be the first to say it aloud. Not until someone stumbled upon the logs. Let's pause here, because this moment is where the story splits, between what was seen and what was felt. What was seen? Cold digital entries, timestamps, phantom logins from devices not registered to any known royal household. What was felt? That pit in the stomach. The silent panic. The sinking realization that someone had found a backdoor, and they were using it. And as you'll soon see, there's only one royal with the resources, the motive, and the outsider perspective to want that access. But again, we're getting ahead of ourselves. Because before Princess Anne broke her silence, before William slammed his fist on a polished oak table in disbelief, before Harry's world began to unravel, there was only the rumor. And this rumor wasn't born from thin air. It was fed by patterns. One such pattern? Meghan's uncanny ability to coincidentally be photographed near key royal events, even after she'd supposedly been left out of the loop. How did she know when William was visiting a veterans hospital privately? Why did her LA team announce a mental health podcast launch hours before Charles addressed the same issue in Parliament? Coincidence? Maybe. But after the third time, it stopped feeling accidental, especially when staffers started noticing that briefings, meant for internal eyes only, had been opened remotely. Let's be clear, these weren't public-facing documents. These were sensitive timelines, routes, private lunch locations, adjustments to security deployment. And every time something leaked, a pattern emerged. It wasn't just a leak. It was surgical. So the question arose, was this digital espionage? Or a petty, calculated game of control? And here's the twist. Most of the royal family didn't believe it. Not at first, because they couldn't fathom it. They didn't want to. For all their frustrations with Meghan, the idea that she would actively tamper with royal security? It sounded too far-fetched, too dangerous, too unthinkable. But not to Anne. She saw the patterns. She trusted her gut. And more importantly, she trusted the IT staff no one else noticed. Because here's something you might not know. While Charles holds the crown and William commands attention, Princess Anne holds the institution. She's the one who reads every memo, who arrives early, who leaves last. She doesn't do fluff. She does facts. So when the rumor grew legs and followed them, and when she reached the end of that trail, she found footprints. But this chapter isn't about the confrontation. That's coming. This chapter is about why the silence finally cracked. Because even Anne has a threshold. And when that line was crossed, she stopped playing quiet. She ordered a full internal sweep. She demanded login histories from every digital security portal tied to the royal rota. She requested timestamp audits from the backup servers no one had touched in years. And when the results came back, she didn't need a name. The devices spoke for themselves. California IP, VPN masking, access sessions during times when no palace staff were logged in. Even packet loss spikes from an overseas connection trying to mimic internal credentials. Now pause, because this isn't Hollywood. This is real digital forensics. And the conclusion? Someone knew what they were doing. Not just guessing passwords or sneaking peeks. We're talking about a coordinated access, someone who had either been taught the system or had inside help. And this is where the contradiction kicks in again. Because even when faced with that evidence, some royals refused to believe it. Harry included. Impossible, he reportedly said during an early debrief. She wouldn't do that. But she did, or someone using her credentials did. And the logs didn't lie. Neither did the video footage that followed. But I'll save that for later. For now, just sit with this moment. A royal system compromised. A digital footprint traced to a device far outside the palace walls. And a rumor, long dismissed. suddenly staring everyone in the face with undeniable evidence. The royal staff knew. The inner circle now knew. And behind closed doors, even the king was briefed. What started as a whisper had become a siren. But the moment that finally shattered the illusion was when someone, somewhere inside the palace, leaked the findings, not to the press, but to someone even more dangerous. Princess and herself. Because when she saw the full logs, she didn't hesitate. She made one call. A call that would set off a chain reaction leading directly to one of the most quiet, yet explosive, detainments in royal history. But what happened next would rewrite everything the world thought it knew about Meghan Markle. And it starts with the woman herself, stepping into a corridor she thought was off-grid, only to be caught by a camera that should have been turned off. It wasn't. And what it captured? Well, that's where we pick up next. She thought the camera was off. She was told, or maybe she assumed, that the wing she entered that night wasn't under surveillance, that no one would be watching, that no logs would be saved, that what she was about to do would slip into the void like all the others. But she was wrong. That one camera, embedded discreetly in the arch of a stone wall, hidden beneath a centuries-old coat of arms, was never listed in the digital manifest. It was analog. A forgotten piece of tech used as a fallback during renovations in the East Wing. And it was still rolling. That's how they caught her. But before that fateful moment was reviewed, rewound, and verified by 3 levels of palace security and one startled MI5 liaison, the conversation inside the royal family was spiraling. Let's go back just a bit. Once the audit confirmed that multiple unauthorized entries into the royal scheduling system had occurred, and that a significant portion of those entries matched digital activity from devices located in Montecito, California, it wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was protocol. And that's when something extraordinary happened. Princess and summoned William and Harry together, without their aides, without their press secretaries, without even King Charles. Just the 3 of them, inside her private quarters. Do you know how rare that is? And doesn't do intimate family interventions. She doesn't meddle. She executes. But this time, it wasn't about symbolism. It was strategy. Because she needed both brothers to understand what was coming before it blew up in the press, or worse, ended up in court. And according to sources who overheard fragments of that meeting, it was as emotional as it was brutal. William was fuming. She put our children at risk, he allegedly said, referencing how small changes to convoy timings could easily compromise George, Charlotte, and Louis. Harry, on the other hand, sat in stunned disbelief. There's no way she'd. You're saying she hacked the monarchy? And didn't flinch. She laid out the printouts. Time logs. IP addresses. Access codes. She didn't need to yell. The data did that for her. And then, as if to drive the point home, she clicked play. That old analog security feed, it had been digitized and reviewed the day before. And what it showed chilled everyone in the room. Meghan, dressed inconspicuously in a black coat and matching headscarf, entering a restricted hallway in the East Wing during an unannounced private visit last autumn. Not during a public appearance. Not during a family funeral. A random Tuesday. She didn't go near the public-facing areas. She made a sharp turn down a hallway that leads to the secure communications room. The SCR, a space used exclusively by internal royal staff to coordinate transport, security schedules, and intelligence briefings when senior royals move between residences. And here's the kicker. That door is secured by both passcode and biometric scanner. So how did she get in? That's the question that made William's voice break when he asked it aloud. Because if Meghan wasn't alone, if someone inside helped her, then this wasn't just a digital crime. It was a conspiracy, a breach of loyalty, and possibly an act of espionage. But even then, in the quiet tension of that room, Harry couldn't accept it. He couldn't process it. Because to believe it was to admit that the woman he defended against the tabloids, against the firm, against the British public, had crossed a line even he couldn't shield her from. And, ever the realist, ended the meeting with a single sentence. Harry, we need you to understand. This isn't about family anymore. It's about the crown. And just like that, the silence returned. For about 36 hours. Because not long after that confrontation, a confidential security memo leaked to the press. And that was the moment everything exploded. The headline on the Daily Mirror was as subtle as a thunderclap. Unauthorized access to royal security logs. Montecito device suspected. The Daily Mail followed up within hours, going further. Breaking, Meghan Markle implicated in royal digital breach. And just like that, the public went from what now to how deep does this go? Social media imploded. Hashtag Meghan was trending globally. Some defended her. She's being framed. This is just more royal bullying. Others demanded action. Arrest her. She put the family in danger. The palace refused to comment, but behind the gates of Windsor and was already moving. She wasn't going to let this spiral into a PR disaster. She was going to make it a security protocol issue. A legal one. Because that's how it operates. She doesn't play politics. She plays defense. And once she had William on her side, and even Harry retreating into silence, the machinery of accountability kicked into high gear. Within 24 hours, legal advisors were looped in. Private communications between palace security and the Metropolitan Police were established. And quietly, through diplomatic channels, Meghan was notified. She was to present herself for questioning in relation to the unauthorized digital access. But here's where it gets even murkier. Because Meghan didn't comply immediately. Her team responded with a statement instead, vague, legalistic, and defensive. The Duchess of Sussex has no knowledge of any such breach. These allegations are not only false, but defamatory. Any suggestion that she tampered with royal systems is categorically denied. But the investigators had already gone further. Because after that analog camera footage was digitized, they checked the access logs for the secure communications room. And guess what? A temporary override code had been used that same night. A code generated by a palace staffer who had resigned just a week prior. Someone who had briefly worked under Prince Harry's communications office before the Sussexes stepped back from royal duties. Coincidence? Or a carefully placed pawn in a long game? The truth is, we don't know yet. But the evidence is stacking. And that's why British authorities, with quiet coordination from Interpol and diplomatic envoys, issued a formal request for detainment under the grounds of cyber interference with UK sovereign assets. That's the technical term. But let's be honest, the world only saw one word. Arrested. It wasn't a dramatic scene. There were no cuffs, no flashing lights. But Meghan Markle, the woman who once walked down the aisle in St. George's Chapel with a global audience watching, was quietly escorted from a private jet for questioning. Not as a duchess, not as a media icon, but as a potential digital trespasser. And that brings us to now. Because while the dust is far from settled and the investigations are far from closed, the royal family has already made one thing clear. The age of silence is over. And has spoken. William has stepped forward. And Harry? Well, he stopped defending. He's just watching now. And maybe, just maybe, beginning to wonder what else he missed. But before we get into Princess Anne's official televised statement, before we dissect William's most emotional royal appearance to date, and before we reveal the full extent of the footage Meghan never expected to surface, we need to go even deeper. Because while the world was reeling from the headlines, inside Parliament, behind locked doors, and under high security, Princess Anne delivered a message that no one outside the room has heard. Until now. And what she said would push the monarchy into its most pivotal moment of the 21st century. What does it take to make the most disciplined, reserved, and tight-lipped royal in history go public? Seriously, ask yourself that. What line must be crossed for Princess Anne, the embodiment of duty, protocol, and royal restraint, to look directly into a camera and say, enough? Because she doesn't do drama. She doesn't do scandals. She doesn't do noise. She does work, grit, service, and silence. But this time, she shattered that silence. And when she did, the world stopped. The woman they call the crown's last guard finally spoke out. And her voice wasn't just calm, it was thunder in disguise. Now let's rewind. Before the statement, before the global headlines, came the breaking point. And it didn't come with a camera. It came with a door. Specifically, the door to the Privy Council Security Subcommittee, a group so private, most people in the UK don't even know it exists. It handles threat assessments, royal travel logistics, and crisis response protocols. When something serious happens inside the monarchy, this is the war room. Princess Anne walked into that chamber without an aide, without notes. She had something far more powerful. She had evidence. In her hand was a thin, unmarked dossier. Inside, timestamps, CCTV footage, IP logs, staff resignation letters, and a single printout of the secure communications room override code, traced back to the breach. The crown had been compromised, and she was there to draw the line. Imagine the silence in that room, the weight in the air, and said what no one else dared to say. This was not a mistake. This was not a miscommunication. This was a deliberate act. And when one of the officials hesitated, reportedly asking if this could be the work of a third party framing Meghan, and didn't blink, she laid the photo on the table, the still image from the analog camera. Meghan, in the corridor, hands gloved, looking both ways before approaching the panel. Anne's voice didn't rise, but her words cut like steel. She knew exactly what she was doing. Let that sink in, because what followed wasn't a royal meltdown. It was a royal activation. The palace began preparing for fallout. Legal teams were put on standby, and instead of hiding behind the veil of no comment, as royals have done for decades, made the boldest move of all. She went public. Now if you're imagining a glitzy press conference or some choreographed TV moment, stop. That's not in style. Her statement came via a pre-recorded segment, filmed in a quiet room in Windsor. No makeup team, no spin, just Anne, sitting in uniform, her medals shining, her face unreadable. And the opening line? Straight fire. For decades, this family has operated with discipline, discretion, and dignity. That trust was broken. There it was. No names, no theatrics, but we all knew exactly who she was talking about. She continued, tampering with royal security systems is not a breach of etiquette. It is not a misstep. It is a threat to the safety of individuals and to the institution that has stood for centuries. She paused. You could hear the air leave the room. And then she said, the matter is under investigation by appropriate authorities. I will not speak further to the legal process, but I will say this. Actions have consequences. Titles do not make one untouchable. Boom. That was the moment the world realized this wasn't just another royal scuffle. This was a reckoning. The media lost it. News anchors scrambled to dissect every word. Lip readers analyzed the micro-movements in her face. Body language experts filled morning panels with breakdowns of her posture. But none of that mattered. What mattered was this. Princess Anne had just broken ranks. Not for scandal, not for politics, but for the one thing she's never compromised on. Integrity. And if you think this was a personal attack, think again. Because this wasn't about petty grudges or family fallouts. This was about the sanctity of the crown. Anne's message was clear. This is not the Real Housewives of Buckingham Palace. This is the monarchy, and it's not to be trifled with. But let's not forget, this wasn't just a professional moment for Anne. This was personal, deeply personal. Because behind closed doors, it was Anne who first voiced concerns about unusual shifts in security protocols. It was Anne who raised alarms about the disappearing schedules. It was Anne who connected the dots between California coincidences and internal disruptions. And each time she did, she was told to stand down. Don't escalate. Don't stir the pot. It's probably just a tech glitch. But Anne doesn't ignore patterns. She's a horsewoman, a strategist. She watches for subtle signs, and when things feel off, she trusts her gut. So when everyone else looked the other way, and looked closer, she noticed when the rota, the sacred royal scheduling system, was accessed after hours. She noticed when events involving her personally were rescheduled without her approval. She noticed when conversations she'd only had in private somehow ended up reflected in tabloid headlines. Not directly quoted, but close enough to be unnerving. And most damning of all, she noticed when Harry started dodging her calls. Now, that may sound trivial, but not in this family. And Harry had always shared a strange, quiet understanding. Both misfits in their own way. Both fond of blunt honesty. He was the wild younger son. She was the invisible workhorse. But there was mutual respect. And yet, after the breach, radio silence. When she finally confronted him, privately, as always, his response said it all. Don't believe everything you see, and she didn't answer, because she didn't need to believe it. She'd seen it. And now, so had the world. But here's where things get even more chilling. Because just 48 hours after Anne's public statement, a new detail emerged from a source inside GCHQ, the UK's top intelligence agency. And what they found could blow this story wide open. And what they found could blow this story wide open. GCHQ, the Government Communications Headquarters. Think of it as the UK's version of the NSA. Their role? Intercept, analyze, and secure sensitive data transmissions, especially those related to national security. So when a whisper from inside that building made it to the palace, it wasn't taken lightly. What GCHQ had uncovered was subtle, almost untraceable. Almost. A series of encrypted digital pings had been detected from a device located in California. These pings were aimed at legacy palace infrastructure, systems that hadn't been used publicly in years. But deep inside those old protocols was a vulnerability, one that hadn't been patched because it was never supposed to be online again. But someone found it, and that someone was using it as a backdoor, not to steal data, but to observe patterns, times, locations, access codes. Think of it like watching a security guard do their rounds every night, not attacking them, just learning their rhythm, until you knew exactly when to slip in unnoticed. This wasn't tabloid-level mischief. This was cyber reconnaissance. The report GCHQ quietly sent to the Royal Cyber Defense Task Unit was blunt. Sophisticated access pattern consistent with insider knowledge. Digital fingerprint suggests repeated logins via masked VPN originating from Southern California. Likely matched to known device registered in Sussex household. Boom. It wasn't just that someone accessed royal security schedules. It was that they knew where to look and how to look without being caught. Until now. And that changed everything. Because it meant this wasn't accidental. It was premeditated. But here's the twist, and you're not going to believe this. One of the logs indicated that access had begun before Meghan and Harry officially stepped down as senior royals. Let that sink in. The very system she allegedly infiltrated was one she once had legitimate access to, until she didn't. And instead of letting that door close, she, or someone working with her, found a way back in. Now, some Meghan supporters will scream, set up, framing, convenient timing. But let's face facts. GCHQ doesn't brief the monarchy on gossip. They don't waste time on drama. They act when national systems are probed. And the digital fingerprint they traced back? It matched a known device previously used during royal travel. A device once issued, you guessed it, to the Duchess of Sussex. So what did Princess Anne do with this new information? She doubled down. Within hours of the GCHQ memo, she personally requested an emergency briefing with King Charles, William, and the Prime Minister's intelligence liaison. No aides, no publicists, no legal counsel, just facts. Eyewitnesses claimed Charles looked ashen. William was described as stone-faced. But Anne, she was resolute. She allegedly said one sentence that is now being whispered through every corridor of Whitehall. If we do not protect the institution from itself, it will die from within. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. Because this was no longer just about Meghan. This was about precedent. About what happens when someone, even a former royal, thinks they can treat the inner workings of the monarchy like a game of chess with no consequences. But here's the most devastating part. Anne wasn't angry. She was hurt, betrayed, because she had once tried, quietly, to welcome Meghan into the fold. She gave her advice others didn't. She respected her work ethic, her apparent drive. She even defended her during the early clashes with palace staff. But now that trust was shattered. And so, she went public again. This time, not with a video, but with a handwritten letter, addressed to the British people. Published in the Times, the Telegraph, and posted in full on the royal family's official website. And it read, "There comes a time when tradition must not be confused with tolerance. The values of duty, service, and discretion are not optional when one wears the crown. Breaches of security, digital or otherwise, are not mere offenses. They are violations of sacred trust. I will not stand by in silence while that trust is undermined. HRH the Princess Royal." That letter sent shockwaves through the country. It wasn't just a message. It was a declaration, and was making it clear. The royal family would no longer protect those who jeopardize its safety. And it worked. Within 72 hours, legal action escalated. Meghan's legal team went into full crisis mode, scrambling to shift the narrative. But the damage was done. Because when Princess Anne, the unshakable pillar of royal loyalty, breaks her silence, you know the system has had enough. And yet, the real drama was still unfolding. Because while the media devoured and statement, while Parliament buzzed with security reviews, and while the world picked sides in the court of public opinion, Prince William was preparing a bombshell of his own. Something no one saw coming. Something that would not only escalate the family conflict, but reveal just how deep the betrayal ran. Something personal. What do you do when the evidence vanishes before your eyes? Not leaks, not gossip, not whispers in the dark, but actual, undeniable, digitally stored truth, gone, erased, deleted from the heart of the royal security system, as if it had never existed. Now ask yourself this. Who has the motive to hide their footprints, and the knowledge to know exactly where to step? Because that's what this chapter is about. Not the rumors, not the speculation, but the facts that almost weren't. Because someone, somewhere, tried to scrub the royal digital archive clean. And they nearly got away with it. Nearly. Let's break this down. You already know about the Royal Rota, the meticulously maintained system that tracks all movements of working royals. From last-minute travel changes to security detail deployments, everything is logged. Every car route, every hotel, every private lunch, even the aliases used when royals check into private clinics or foreign embassies. Now imagine having access to that. Imagine being able to delete a royal's travel plan or alter a motorcade's route just slightly. Not enough to raise immediate red flags, but just enough to create confusion. Or, worse, vulnerability. That's exactly what someone tried to do. It started with a patch update. Routine. Innocent. The royal household's tech team had pushed a scheduled update to the Rota's encrypted backend. A minor security patch. Nothing unusual. But after the update, one of the technicians noticed something strange. A log entry. One that tracked the exact departure time of Princess and from Sandringham on a private visit. Was gone. Completely gone. Not corrupted. Not archived. Just erased. That shouldn't have been possible. Because the Rota was designed to never allow manual deletions. Even senior royals can't tamper with entries. They can only request adjustments, which are always time-stamped and stored. So who deleted it? And more importantly, how? At first, the tech team chalked it up to a migration bug. They initiated a full system scan, and that's when they found it. Over 60 entries, wiped. 60. That's not a glitch. That's an operation. Deleted items included arrival times for Princess Anne's convoy from Gatwick, a last-minute Kensington Palace security adjustment for Prince William, 2 emergency contact overrides associated with young royal school pickups, and, most damning of all, the full itinerary for King Charles's unannounced visit to a military base in Cyprus. Let that last one sink in, because that visit wasn't even public knowledge. The only people who had access to that document were the king's private staff and the Royal Rota's internal system. And yet, it was gone. But here's where it gets truly sinister. When the IT forensic team dove into the server's shadow logs, a backup process that even most royals don't know exists, they found traces of the deleted entries. And do you know what else they found? The deletion requests weren't made from within the palace. They were made remotely, from a device logged in via a secure VPN originating outside of the UK, specifically from California. Again, same masked IP signature as before, same encryption patterns, same timings. And here's the part that will make your skin crawl. The logs weren't deleted all at once. They were removed slowly, over weeks, meticulously, surgically, each deletion made to look like a normal adjustment. This wasn't sloppy. This was careful, calculated. And the moment that realization hit, the investigation shifted from internal glitch to active sabotage. That's when William stepped in. You see, William had been quietly monitoring the investigation ever since and looped him in during the first breach. He hadn't said much publicly, hadn't pushed Harry, hadn't even confronted Meghan. But the deletions? That was his line. Because William knows what those logs mean. They're more than schedules. They're layers of security. If those logs fall into the wrong hands, it's not just a PR nightmare. It's a safety risk, a national threat. And now he knew someone had tried to wipe them out. He asked for a private briefing with the head of Royal Cybersecurity. Just the two of them. No Charles. No Anne. No press office. The briefing lasted under 15 minutes. When it was over, William reportedly stood up, stared out the window of the briefing room, and said only one thing. She used our system against us. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't rage. He just stared. Because sometimes, silence is louder than fury. And here's the emotional gut punch. Some of the deletions were tied to William's own children. Routes to Lambrook School. Details on private outings with Kate. Even code words used by their personal security teams. Who would do that? Why would anyone want to make those logs disappear? Is this espionage or something worse? Is it jealousy? Revenge? Control? Or did someone think they were above the system? William didn't need to say it out loud. The implications were clear. This wasn't just a rogue staffer. This wasn't just sloppy protocol. This was a targeted purge, a digital laundering of royal security. And at the center of it was a device linked directly to Meghan Markle's known digital footprint. But the logs weren't the only thing that turned up during that scan, because tucked within a deeper layer of the system, buried inside a test server thought to be inactive, was a name, a username, one that had been deactivated months ago, but had been reactivated twice in the past 90 days. A username associated with a former palace aide who left abruptly after Harry and Meghan's exit. An aide who had access to the Rhoda's backend, and who now resides, in the United States. Coincidence? Or collaboration? That's the question the palace still hasn't answered. Because if this aide provided Meghan with access, then this scandal isn't just personal. It's criminal. It's treasonous. And the more William dug, the more he realized that this was no longer a matter for palace walls. This was international. This was war, the quiet kind. The kind fought through code and silence and layers of hidden betrayal. But here's the chilling part. The forensic team found one last thing. A single unsent message, never delivered, never viewed. Buried in the user logs of the Rhoda's internal system. It read, "She knows. Pull everything. Wipe the Cyprus trip first." Who was she? Princess or someone else? And who was this person warning? We still don't know. But William does. And what he did next, no one expected. Because in a moment of calculated fury, he went directly to his father, the king, and delivered an ultimatum. Either we go public, or I do. Either we go public, or I do. That wasn't a threat. It was a promise. And when Prince William looked King Charles dead in the eye and said those 9 words, the tone inside Buckingham Palace shifted from cautious containment to full-blown crisis response. Because William, once known as the calm heir, the silent soldier, the steady hand behind the scenes, had reached his limit. For years, he had held the institution together with clenched fists and forced smiles, balancing tradition with modernity, diplomacy with dignity. But now, his children's safety had been compromised. His brother was silent. And his sister, the ever-steady princess Anne, had already rung the alarm bell. It was William's turn. And King Charles? He wasn't ready. According to multiple insiders, the confrontation was fierce, not loud, but sharp, tense, emotional. Charles reportedly tried to maintain composure, reminding William that any public acknowledgement of a digital breach would trigger diplomatic fallout, not just with the US, but with other Commonwealth countries who shared encrypted scheduling systems for royal visits. But William didn't blink. "This isn't about politics. This is about my family," Charles countered. "You don't think I know that?" "William, then act like it." There was a silence, long, heavy. And then William dropped the final blow. He handed Charles a USB. Contained within it, the unfiltered, unredacted deletion report, complete with IP traces, forensic timestamps, and the warning message. "She knows. Pull everything. Wipe the Cyprus trip first." And right beneath that, an archived user log linking the deletion pattern to a reactivated profile that had accessed the Rhoda system 12 times in the previous month. 12 times. It was irrefutable, and William knew it. So he said, again, "Either we go public, or I do. And I won't be subtle about it." Charles didn't answer right away. Because how could he? This wasn't just a family scandal anymore. It was a monarchy-threatening breach, and the digital fingerprints all pointed in one direction. But the king wasn't the only one listening. Unbeknownst to both men, a private note had already been dispatched to MI5, not by Charles or William, but by Princess Anne. She wasn't waiting. She never had. And when William left that room, jaw clenched, footsteps thunderous, he wasn't walking out as a son. He was walking out as the future king. The next day, the palace issued an internal directive. all rota-related devices would undergo a secondary audit. A full security lockdown was enforced. Access to the scheduling system was suspended for all external users, even former staff. But it was too late to contain the damage, because just as that directive went out, so did the leak. An anonymous source provided The Guardian and The Times with portions of the deletion log. Not the whole document, but enough. Enough to spark a media firestorm. Enough to confirm to the public what the palace had tried to keep under wraps. Someone had deleted over 60 security entries from the royal rota, and the device used? Allegedly linked to a former senior royal's household. The press had a field day. The headlines wrote themselves. Digital sabotage in the palace. Who's protecting the royals? Prince William confronts King over Meghan-linked security breach. Why are royal travel logs being erased? But the most viral coverage didn't come from newspapers. It came from a leaked image. A single frame, sent anonymously to multiple media outlets. A screenshot from the rota's backup interface. And on the screen, the reactivated user account. The name? M. Harrison. Now, for the casual observer, that might not mean much. But insiders knew that M. Harrison was the internal profile used by Meghan Markle during her brief tenure as a working royal, based on her legal surname, Mountbatten-Windsor, and her pre-royal alias. That profile had been deactivated after the Sussexes' royal departure. So how did it come back? That was the question on every lip. But William already had his answer. He believed Meghan, or someone acting on her behalf, had used the old credentials to sneak into the system and delete entries that would expose unauthorized access. A digital cleanup job, sloppy in places, but effective enough to evade notice until the analog backups revealed the gaps. And now, the world knew it too. Which brings us to the emotional core of this chapter. Because beyond the tech, beyond the politics, beyond the monarchy's PR scramble, there's the pain, William's pain. Because for all the protocol and diplomacy, this was still his family, his brother, his nephews, a woman he once welcomed, however awkwardly, into their tightly controlled world. He had defended the institution, protected it, but even he never expected this. He never expected betrayal to come not through letters or leaks or interviews, but through a keyboard, through lines of code and login credentials, through the erasure of travel schedules and motorcade routes, through the deletion of his children's locations. Let that land. This wasn't just betrayal. It was personal. And that's why, just 3 days after his confrontation with Charles, William made the quietest, but most powerful, move of all. He authorized a full digital transparency protocol. For the first time in history, certain elements of the royal rota's past entries would be made viewable, with redactions, by the Parliamentary Oversight Committee. That might sound boring. But in royal terms, that's nuclear, because it meant opening the books, breaking centuries of silence, letting outsiders into the sacred walls. It was a calculated risk, a trust fall, and it sent a message. The monarchy would no longer protect those who endangered it, no matter how close to the crown they once stood. But just as the investigation reached fever pitch, something happened that no one could have predicted. A second set of deletions, new ones, fresh attempts to purge entries. This time from an IP located in New York, and the only person publicly known to be in New York at that time, Doria Ragland, Meghan's mother. Coincidence? Perhaps. But investigators weren't convinced. Because these new deletions weren't about current schedules. They targeted historical entries. Entries tied to the initial breach, the ones and first noticed. The ones that started this entire firestorm. It was like someone was trying to clean up the original mess before the final report could be completed. And that meant only one thing. There's more. More names. More logins. More access points. And possibly more collaborators. Which raises the terrifying question. If Meghan didn't act alone, who else was involved? And if the deletions are still happening, what exactly are they trying so desperately to hide? We'll find out. Because and won't stop. William won't stop. And now, neither will Parliament. Because what was once a digital mystery is becoming a constitutional crisis. And at the center of it all is the woman who once claimed she didn't read the royal rota. Turns out, she may have rewritten it. But she wasn't the only one watching. Because just as the dust began to settle, someone inside GCHQ discovered something buried in the encrypted audit logs. Not just a deletion. A message. Hidden. Encoded and addressed to someone shocking. To H, tell her to stop. This time, they're watching everything. What does betrayal look like when it comes from someone you once called family? Not a stranger, not a rival, but someone you let into your circle, your home, your bloodline. Now imagine that betrayal isn't whispered in a hallway or shouted across a dinner table. It's buried in a string of computer code, a security log, a deletion timestamp. That's what happened to Prince William. And when he found out, the future King of England didn't yell. He didn't throw anything. He didn't call a press conference or storm into his father's office. No, he went quiet, dangerously quiet, because that's what William does when the stakes are too high for emotion. He processes, he calculates, and then he acts. But the moment he realized exactly what had been erased, the schedules tied to his children, the details of Princess Anne's itinerary, even adjustments to his own security detail, it wasn't just a digital breach anymore. It was war. Let's rewind to that moment. The folder handed to him was thick, marked for your eyes only. Inside were documents decrypted by the Palace cyber unit, the ones that had been hidden deep in the royal system shadows. On the top page, a single log entry. Wrote a deletion request. Target, Lambrook route, George, Charlotte, Lewis. Override code accepted. Device ID, M.Harrison01. VPN, Montecito Mask 2. William stared at it. The date and time matched perfectly with the morning his children's convoy was delayed due to a communications error. An error that caused a 6-minute vulnerability window on a public road. 6 minutes. 3 children. 1 misstep, and everything could have changed. He didn't breathe for a full 10 seconds. His hands gripped the edge of the table. White-knuckled. Across the room, a private advisor cleared his throat gently. Sir, there's more. More. And there was. The next entry? Schedule obfuscation, Princess and Gatwick arrival. Travel schedule modified, unscheduled stop added. That stop forced Anne's convoy to take an alternate route, one that hadn't been cleared by counter-surveillance teams. She was later approached by a lone paparazzo, somehow tipped off at exactly the right moment. Now that coincidence wasn't just suspicious. It was surgical. William flipped through the pages, the evidence piling like ash after a fire. Each deletion wasn't just a technical anomaly. It was a threat, calculated, precise, and worst of all, personal. Because if someone wanted to intimidate the royal family, this is how you do it. No bombs, no threats, just quiet manipulations in the background to make them feel exposed, watched, unsafe. And suddenly, William realized something. This wasn't just about control. It was about sending a message. He leaned back, stared at the far wall, where a portrait of Queen Elizabeth hung in silent judgment. What would she have done? Would she have gone public? Would she have tried to contain it? He didn't know, but he knew what he had to do. He called one person, Princess Anne. The conversation lasted less than a minute. She didn't speak much. She just confirmed what he already knew. The logs weren't just altered. They were strategically wiped. And all the digital trails led back to the same place. Montecito. Meghan. But that's not what broke William. What broke him was the message. Because attached to the final deletion log, hidden in a subfolder labeled Old Archive, Do Not Touch, was that encrypted note. To H, tell her to stop. This time, they're watching everything. To H. Harry, William's brother. The one person he still hoped was on the outside of all this. The one person he thought would never be part of something so dangerous. But that message, it didn't confirm guilt. It confirmed knowledge. Harry knew. Maybe not from the beginning. Maybe not even willingly. But he knew. He had received that warning, and he hadn't come forward. He hadn't told the palace. He hadn't warned William, or Anne, or Charles. He'd stayed silent. And in that silence, everything changed. William sat for a long time after the call ended. No words, just thought. Memories. Old photos. Days in the garden as kids. The first time he held George. And Harry had joked, "You're officially a dad now, mate." It all felt distant. Fake. Because if Harry had protected Meghan over this, then there was no going back. That night, William didn't sleep. He met with 2 of his most trusted advisors and made a decision. No more delays. No more half measures. He was going to confront his father. He was going to tell the truth. And he was going to make it very clear. The monarchy couldn't survive another cover-up. But what he didn't expect was that someone else had already made a move. Because the next morning, as William was preparing to deliver the full breach report to King Charles, Princess and sent a single line via secure message. "Don't come to me. Meet me in Parliament." And when William arrived, she wasn't alone. A senior intelligence official was waiting, and what he revealed would change the course of the monarchy forever. She thought the camera was off. She was told, or maybe she assumed, that the wing she entered that night wasn't under surveillance, that no one would be watching, that no logs would be saved, that what she was about to do would slip into the void like all the others. But she was wrong. That one camera, embedded discreetly in the arch of a stone wall, hidden beneath a centuries-old coat of arms, was never listed in the digital manifest. It was analog, a forgotten piece of tech used as a fallback during renovations in the East Wing. And it was still rolling. That's how they caught her. But before that fateful moment was reviewed, rewound, and verified by 3 levels of palace security and one startled MI5 liaison, the conversation inside the royal family was spiraling. Let's go back just a bit. Once the audit confirmed that multiple unauthorized entries into the royal scheduling system had occurred, and that a significant portion of those entries matched digital activity from devices located in Montecito, California, it wasn't just a hunch anymore. It was protocol. And that's when something extraordinary happened. Princess and summoned William and Harry together, without their aides, without their press secretaries, without even King Charles. Just the 3 of them, inside her private quarters. Do you know how rare that is? And doesn't do intimate family interventions. She doesn't meddle. She executes. But this time, it wasn't about symbolism. It was strategy. Because she needed both brothers to understand what was coming before it blew up in the press, or worse, ended up in court. And according to sources who overheard fragments of that meeting, it was as emotional as it was brutal. William was fuming. "She put our children at risk," he allegedly said, referencing how small changes to convoy timings could easily compromise George, Charlotte, and Louis. Harry, on the other hand, sat in stunned disbelief. "There's no way she'd. You're saying she hacked the monarchy?" And didn't flinch. She laid out the printouts. Time logs, IP addresses, access codes. She didn't need to yell. The data did that for her. And then, as if to drive the point home, she clicked play. That old analog security feed, it had been digitized and reviewed the day before. And what it showed chilled everyone in the room. Meghan, dressed inconspicuously in a black coat and matching headscarf, entering a restricted hallway in the East Wing during an unannounced private visit last autumn. Not during a public appearance. Not during a family funeral. A random Tuesday. She didn't go near the public-facing areas. She made a sharp turn down a hallway that leads to the secure communications room. The SCR, a space used exclusively by internal royal staff to coordinate transport, security schedules, and intelligence briefings when senior royals move between residences. And here's the kicker. That door is secured by both passcode and biometric scanner. So how did she get in? That's the question that made William's voice break when he asked it aloud. Because if Meghan wasn't alone, if someone inside helped her, then this wasn't just a digital crime. It was a conspiracy, a breach of loyalty, and possibly an act of espionage. But even then, in the quiet tension of that room, Harry couldn't accept it. He couldn't process it. Because to believe it was to admit that the woman he defended against the tabloids, against the firm, against the British public, had crossed a line even he couldn't shield her from. And, ever the realist, ended the meeting with a single sentence. "Harry, we need you to understand. This isn't about family anymore. It's about the crown." And just like that, the silence returned. For about 36 hours. Because not long after that confrontation, a confidential security memo leaked to the press. And that was the moment everything exploded. The headline on the Daily Mirror was as subtle as a thunderclap. Unauthorized access to royal security logs. Montecito device suspected. The Daily Mail followed up within hours, going further. Breaking, Meghan Markle implicated in royal digital breach. And just like that, the public went from what now to how deep does this go? Social media imploded. Hashtag Megangate was trending globally. Some defended her. She's being framed. This is just more royal bullying. Others demanded action. Arrest her. She put the family in danger. The palace refused to comment, but behind the gates of Windsor and was already moving. She wasn't going to let this spiral into a PR disaster. She was going to make it a security protocol issue, a legal one. Because that's how Anne operates. She doesn't play politics. She plays defense. And once she had William on her side, and even Harry retreating into silence, the machinery of accountability kicked into high gear. Within 24 hours, legal advisors were looped in. Private communications between palace security and the Metropolitan Police were established. And quietly, through diplomatic channels, Meghan was notified. She was to present herself for questioning in relation to the unauthorized digital access. But here's where it gets even murkier. Because Meghan didn't comply immediately, her team responded with a statement instead, vague, legal.